like everybody had a good Thanksgiving. I know we did, and guess we've all got a lot to be thankful for. And sometimes we think a lot to worry about too, but it doesn't do much good. But I think when we look at the news today, as like it's been so much, we see a lot of things that kind of astound us, surprise us. One thing I was just speaking to Don about is I have to say I was, a little surprised to see the amount of anti-Semitism, not only in the world but in our country, and so bold and brazen about it, and how they can be so quick to forget and excuse the atrocities that were committed against Israel, so recently. And it's kind of amazing, and that's why today I wanted to talk a little bit about Judah, because actually that's what we call it, Israel, the little country over there. But it's actually the tribe of Judah, at least part of the tribe. But they are part of Israel, so it's appropriate, I guess, to call it Israel. And we see how you just look back in history and you just see the persecution of the Jews. And I guess in some ways, like all of us, they had a lot of it coming. But it's so enduring and so always under the surface of things, and it pops out. You just know it has to be of Satan. All this persecution. But anyway, I wanted to just read some things in Zechariah. There's many places we could go, but Zechariah seems to sum up a lot of it. And some of the things we'll be reading here pertains to ancient Israel, ancient Judah, but some of it is prophecies for the future too. And here it's in the 9th chapter. It talks about judgment on Israel's enemies. And at least that's the caption in my version of the Bible here. In verse 3, it's the 9th chapter, verse 3, Tyre has built herself a stronghold. She has heaped up silver like dust and gold like dirt in the streets. But the Lord will take away her possessions and destroy her power on the sea. And, this, again, it's talking about it's a judgment on Israel's enemies. And it speaks of Ashkelon, and, we've seen that on the map. The city of Ashkelon is still there. Ashkelon will see it, and I got to put my glasses on, and fear. Gaza, and that's a name that's familiar to us, Gaza will writhe in agony, and Ekron too, for her hope will wither. Gaza will lose her king, and Ashkelon will be deserted. And verse 6 it says, a mongrel people will occupy Ashdod. I will put an end to the pride of the Philistines. And Philistines, that sounds a whole lot like Palestinians to me, and I expect probably it is one of the same people, many of them. And those who are left will... Now this here, it jumps to the future. It says, those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah. So, sound like in the future in God's kingdom, some of these people are going to see the light. And then here in the 9th verse, it jumps ahead too. It says, rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you. Verse 10, I will take away the chariots from Ephraim. Of course, here that's speaking of the 10 tribes, the northern tribes a little bit. Most of this is about Judah, and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. And talking about Jesus, the king, he will proclaim peace in the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea, and from the river, which is Euphrates, to the ends of the earth. So it jumps ahead to Christ ruling the earth in that 1,000-year reign. And over in verse 16, same chapter, verse 16, the Lord their God will save his people on that day. Of course, on that day refers to his coming, second coming. And a shepherd saves his flock. So when we look at little Israel's plight over there, it looks desperate and maybe hopeless. But it's not, because they have a great ally, or a great shepherd, is what you might say. In verse 10, of course, this chapter's captioned, "The Lord will care for Judah." Chapter 10, in verse 3. "My anger burns against the shepherds." So God is not too pleased with the leaders of Israel, I guess, at this point, and I'm sure he's not pleased with ours. "And I will punish the leaders, for the Lord Almighty will care for his flock, the people of Judah." That is very good news. "I will strengthen Judah." This is verse 6. "I will strengthen Judah and save the tribes of Joseph." Well, again, he's including all the tribes of Israel. Joseph is just another name for the house of Israel. They will be as though I had not rejected them. "The Ephraimites," verse 7, "will become like warriors, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Their children will see it and be joyful. Their hearts will rejoice in the Lord." Verse 8, "I will signal for them and gather them in. Surely I will redeem them, and they will be as numerous as before." So they've been scattered, but they will be redeemed. Verse 9, "Though I scatter them among the peoples, yet in distant lands, they will remember me, and they and their children will survive, and they will return." You know, that brings to mind that when the northern tribes were banished, when they were conquered and banished, it was because they rebelled against God, would not keep his covenant. But you know, in past times, this nation was established and has printed more Bibles, delivered more Bibles, sent missionaries around the world like no other nation in history. So I think has fulfilled some of that already. Let's go to chapter 12. And here again it talks about Jerusalem's enemies to be destroyed. Chapter 12, verse I guess it's verse 1. "A prophecy, the word of the Lord concerning Israel. The Lord who stretches out the heavens and who lays the foundations of the earth, and who forms the human spirits within a person, declares, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem." And I mean, we can really see that. It seems like the whole world is concerned with that little bitty tiny nation. "On that day," future time, second coming, "on that day when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves." Seems like that is happening in this time. Don't know. We never know how quickly things will come to fruition, but we can see shadows and things of this happening already. Verse 6, "On that day I will make the clans of Judah like a fire pot in a woodpile, like a flaming torch among sheaves. They will consume all the surrounding people right and left, but Jerusalem will remain intact in her place." In same chapter, but skipping down to verse 10, well, I think I'll start in verse 9. We get in a very interesting place. Christ has returned to this earth, and here he is in Jerusalem, and here are the Jewish people. "On that day I will set out to destroy all the nations that attack Jerusalem." Verse 9. Verse 10, "I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit And of course, down here it says, this Spirit. So he's going to pour out on the Spirit of God. Grace, it'll be a spirit of grace and supplication. Well, I think we all know that grace means undeserved pardon. So Israel will get an undeserved pardon. Grace and supplication, they will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son. Can only imagine how that will be, that when the Jewish people realize that Christ really was the Messiah. And then verse 13, it tells a little bit about what he does about it. Verse 1, on that day, chapter 13, verse 1, on that day a fountain will be opened to the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and impurity. And if you want to know more about, that fountain that will be opened as God's Spirit, I guess. On that day I will banish the names of the idols from the lands, and they will be remembered no more. And now we go to the 14th chapter of Zechariah. And verse 1, it says, a day of the Lord is coming, Jerusalem, when your possessions will be plundered and divided up within your very walls. So it's given a little more detail. That day will be a very scary day. Jerusalem will be surrounded by enemies. It says, I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. That city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women ravished. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Verse 2, then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations. Excuse me. As he fights on the day of battle. And on that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will cleave in two. And you will flee by, verse 5, you will flee by the mountain valley, for it will extend to Azel. And you will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. In verse 6, on that day there will be neither sunlight nor cold, frost nor darkness. It will be a unique day known only to the Lord. And verse 8, on that day living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the east, the Dead Sea, and half to the west, the Mediterranean Sea. And if you want to know more about that living water, we're not going to go there, but just go to Ezekiel 47, and it'll give you a lot of details about the river. Shall we gather at the river? That's what I think about the song, It'll be a life-giving water that will actually restore life and to the Dead Sea. Verse 9, the Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day there will be one Lord, and his name, the only name. And so let's skip down to verse 16 in Zechariah 14. Verse 16. Then the survivors from all the nations that have attacked Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, and to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. That's something I guess we don't think about much, but there will be survivors even of the people that attacked Jerusalem. Maybe not many of the soldiers, but at least the nations where they came from. And they will live into that kingdom, and they will be they'll be commanded to follow God's laws and ordinances. If any of the people of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord Almighty will have they will have no rain. So it's not going to be optional. But sounds like a a good story, a good ending for all the stuff we see going on in the world today. Thank you.